Good morning, trade professionals. Welcome back to the Simply Trade Roundup news edition, obviously. It's Monday, so we're here to hit you with some fun or maybe not so fun news. Also, it was St. Patrick's Day yesterday, so hope you got lucky this weekend in whichever way that might be. But some of us are not that lucky because we've been seeing the news and some of them are not so great. So, something that's really hitting us all in my generation is the TikTok situation that's been happening or the bill that was passed. So, we'll see how that goes. But I am here with Lalo and Andy. Good morning.
Good
How are
morning.
you guys?
Good, and you?
Okay, so going into our first article, we have the British and the Texas unite in a state-level trade pact. So Britain is set to sign a groundbreaking state-level trade pact with Texas, marking the largest agreement of its kind with a U.S. state to date. So this agreement allows the UK firms to tap into a combined GDP of 5.3 trillion pounds, opening doors to a quarter of the entire U.S. economy. This is kind of wild. And at first I didn't know if I read it right because I thought it was talking about the United States, but no, in fact it talked about Texas. And so I do have a question about this article. So how does this trade agreement contribute to the broader goal of strengthening economic ties between Britain and the United States? Since this is only with Texas, how is this affecting Britain and the United States?
Well, let me just jump in and real quick. This is one of the areas where I have been critical of the current administration, not because it's, from a political standpoint, one way or the other. What I've been saying all along, the current administration has spent more time on renewable energies and labor rates and things of that nature, but they've not put together any kind of a trade deal. And ever since Biden has come into the office for the last 3 years now, the negotiations have been frozen with a U.S.-UK trade pact or trade deal. That still doesn't prevent states from reaching out to individual countries to try and continue to promote and stimulate some international trade. And that's what's happened here. Florida's already got it's a memo of understanding, basically. And they're reaching out. Florida reached out to the UK. Now Texas has done it. And they're focused on energy, life sciences, and professional services, according to the article. With that, I will say that I'm not sure there are, there's not enough details in the particular article to say what is it they're actually trying to stimulate, other than trying to, shall we say, it's almost like an advertising type scenario where they're trying to promote the commodities and businesses and services that each country has in the Texas area as well as throughout the UK. So that said, it is just something where it would flourish even more once the US and the UK are able to draft and sign a trade deal. But for right now, it's just at the state level and they're continuing on.
I feel that this is the UK trying to prove or show to the United States that they are willing and able and looking to do a deal. And because they can't do it at the federal level, they're setting a precedent with doing one with Texas, and therefore maybe creating a framework that will work at a federal level. And so, in my opinion, it's more of a strategic move by the UK. Of course, the Texas is enjoying it in the sense that we get a deal here in Texas with the UK, but I feel it's more on the side of the UK that they're looking at it and saying, okay, well, now that we set a trade deal with at least one state in the United States, maybe that'll help us create, the federal one and be able to use the one in Texas as an example, pretty much to build something bigger and better with the U.S. So I'm just looking at it that way. I'm thinking it more of the business aspect of it, not the politics of it. And a business person would think of it that way and say, hey, well, if I can't create a deal with this, maybe if I do this strategically speaking, I can then get in and do something with this other person. You know what I mean? And so that,
Yeah.
to me, I'm looking at it that way more than, any other another point of view.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. All right. Well, this is a good article. I honestly, that this one was the one that's most interested me, just because I've heard so much about Brexit, and I've been really interested in about how everything kind of escalated afterwards. So I feel like they're making their comeback soon, hopefully, and things get better there. Anyways, we're moving into the second article, and this one's pretty interesting. So we're uncovering the cyber shadows at America's ports, which is kind of crazy. I didn't know something like that existed. Technology is getting wild, but so there's a Chinese cyber threat within the nation's biggest ports, specifically focusing on concerns surrounding Chinese-made cranes and potential vulnerabilities in their operating software. So this is kind of wild to me, and it's even I feel like the United States would know this ahead of time. I don't know. I think there should be such security, or I feel like there would be.
Well, I mean, here's the thing.
But what do you guys think about? Yeah, what do you guys think about this?
This has come up quite a bit, and and it's come up in the past. And again, the 80%, according to the article, which is very well written, this one is CNBC, I guess it is, or NBC anyway. Regardless, it is 80%, according to this, is of the cranes in the U.S. have been manufactured in China. Now, when you have, and especially anything that you're manufacturing today, you're going to have some software that operates the crane. Case in point, when you need to move the crane from the right to the left or up and down or lift things or whatever.
Yeah.
You've got software that says when the operator moves this handle or turns this wheel or whatever the case may be, it's going to say, okay, that means kick in this particular electric motor or that engine or whatever, and pull this cable short or let it down or all those kinds of things. Folks, I'm not trying to be, elementary here. It's just, that's the way I'm going to have to be because I'm kind of, simple here. The point being is that there's got to be software for that. What the fear is, and was in the accusation in the past, is with these Chinese cranes, you have the software that China has developed. Yeah, again, you've got cameras that are operating things so the operator can operate safely and whatnot. But with that, you can then see the actual items being loaded, offloaded, or how much traffic, how busy your port is, all those kinds of things. You can even see, what ships that are in there and whatnot. The fear is that information, just like the Huawei situation earlier, several years back, where information that went through a wireless router was being transmitted back to China. Well, the question is is China now monitoring the port activity of all our, U.S. ports? According to this article, they went and looked at them and said that the owners of these cranes have stated that the software actually is not Chinese software, but it's German and Switzerland based. So, and different companies have, I guess, developed the software to operate the cranes. Supposedly, the ports have multiple firewalls to prevent people trying to come in and hack in. The question is what about information that is generated from within the cranes, if you will, in this particular case, or other systems within the ports, and then transmitted back out? And so that's what's going to have to be looked at.
Yeah, this is interesting. I think this is interesting. Lalo, do you have a take on that?
Well, yeah, I guess just a little bit of so the software for these cranes are not produced or written in China. They are not. They are installed in China. The software is written and produced in Japan and in Germany. So the problem is that a lot of ports require that the software, the problem is that the software is required by procedures or standards, call it whatever you want, from the ports, like let's say the port of Long Beach. Actually, that's a bad example because they don't require it. It's like the port of South Carolina. Well, it's one of them. They require that the software is installed at the point of origin that the crane is getting built, meaning it has to be installed and implemented in China when the cranes are getting produced. The problem is that it is at that time that the software is getting hacked and manipulated by the Chinese, even though they didn't produce the software.
Right. They can add things to it. They can, yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the issue that they're going through right now, is that they're considering this a problem that may create, cybersecurity issues once it's built and implemented here in the United States at the port. So that's the biggest issue. And as Andy said, we did have a conversation and a podcast that's coming up, I would say in about a week or so, maybe 2 weeks, with Amy Strauss. And it's very interesting because that's exactly what we're talking about. Not only that, but when we went to TPM a couple of weeks ago in Long Beach, that was also a very hot topic as well. The cybersecurity concerns of the ports, not only ports, but the whole supply chain itself. Like, who in the heck would have ever known that a crane is a cybersecurity threat to the United States? Nobody would have imagined. I didn't until I talked to Amy.
Right.
I never in my life thought that a crane was going to be that bad of a cybersecurity threat for the United States.
Moving on, and this one again is about China. Why do we keep talking about them?
Because they are playing hardball in the global economy.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Russia is going through elections, which is also a funny story. If you want to read the news, you should read those because funny things are happening there. We'll have to see who will be the president, right?
Really sad the way they do the election over there.
Very sad. And, there's people, whatever. So it says China and Russia's flourishing trade amidst Western sanction. So basically, am I right here? Oh, yeah. Trade is flourishing between China and Russia, which has emerged as a vital lifeline for Russian companies amidst the sanctions. Chinese companies, particularly in the automotive industry, have, and we've heard about this because Chinese is kind of bringing up their automotive industry, and they have capitalized on the void left by Western firms in the Russian market, resulting in a significant increase in Chinese car brands' market share. We've talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Probably not, like maybe a
it's
few
just
days
showing
ago.
the results of it. China and Russia have been pushing to circumvent the Western sanctions, if you will, those from Europe, from the U.S., the U.K., Australia, New Zealand, and others. And they're not using the U.S. dollar, obviously, for the exchange. They're using the Chinese yuan or the Russian ruble and for exchange, and they're circumventing the whole Western banking system. And this is part of the deal is that now we're showing the results of it is that their economies are flourishing because of this. Now, that said, keep in mind, as far as these sanctions now, everybody wants access to the U.S. market. Why? Because we're the largest economy in the world. China's the second largest economy in the world. Russia, I think, is about the 10th largest. But saying, again, as they're progressing on, we're allowing China to circumvent the sanctions. Why? Because they're going in and they're dealing economically, and it's bolstering Russia's economy by doing that. And yet the sanctions are put in there to try and change the behavior of the Russian government to back off on Ukraine. So as we're moving forward and allowing this to go on, I mean, we're putting in the sanctions, trying to stop the Russian-Ukraine war. They have now an alternative to continue to bolster their own economy in Russia, doing business with China, as well as North Korea and Iran and all these other nefarious countries. And the U.S. and other countries around the world are not willing to hold China accountable to say, look, you're not adhering to these sanctions as part of the World Trade Organization or the WTO you're a member of. You're not willing to, you're circumventing this, so you're promoting the war of Russia against Ukraine. So that's one of those things where when you have a economic power that's not willing to support the sanctions and basically is profiting from that, until the other countries around the world say, you know what, financially, we need to hold you accountable, China. So guess what? We're going to start adding tariffs to yours or stop doing business with you as far as with that, to get China to put pressure on them to stop supporting the Russia situation. Until then, it's going on. And guess what? China's benefiting from it. Russia's benefiting from it.
Yeah, that's the craziest thing. I mean, this article was kind of striking to me because those are two world powers that are, they want power, Russia and same for China.
Yep.
And the fact that they're working well together, no bueno. And especially with everything that's going on. They don't care. They just want power. Since yesterday we had St. Patrick's Day, I figured I would get a St. Patrick's Day fact. So gonna have the Guinness beer, which we all know, right? That really dark beer, super popular, Irish, whatever. But in fact, in the 1920s, doctors would advise pregnant women to drink Guinness was an effective way to supply the body with iron, mineral that expecting mothers require 50% more of than others who are not pregnant. How crazy, right? In the 1920s, imagine you get told from your doctor that you should probably drink a Guinness.
Yep.
Well, we hope that you had many of those yesterday. Anyways, that's it for our episode today. And I hope you have a great week. Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.